As an indigenous way of life, we have a certain religious right to take care of our children how we seem suitable for them.
This is a divine group of beings, indigenous, Moorish, American, natural beings. That's who we are, right? So we have the right to do what we want.
The local leader, called a Grand Sheikh, says there's nothing in the religion that stops members from getting medical care. The faith was founded by this man, Noble Drew Ali, in 1913. Its main belief is that they are African Americans descended from North African Muslims, known as the Moors.
This DVD is to be a prelude to A.A. Rashid's lecture that he was supposed to do in Toronto, that they didn't let him come across the border. So what we decided to do was to take the initiative to present some information in order to give people a little bit of understanding as to why this lecture was supposed to happen and the seriousness of nationality and the fact that if we don't claim one, or if we do claim one, the beast is going to continue to do what they're doing in order to stop or to put a blockade in front of that manifesting. And that meaning people labeled as Negro, Black, Colored, African American, African Canadian, etc. having a nationality. So first of all, before we even get into the info, the reason that we're doing this work is because of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. So we give high honors and praises to the Prophet for coming on the scene as Allah's last prophet to tell us the truth about our nationality and our birthrights that was taken from us by the Inquisitionists, the Franks, the Brits, the Englishmen, the Pilgrims, the colonizers, the Crusaders, etc., who came to this land that they call today North, South, Central America and the Caribbean, right? And usurped the power from this land by getting the original people of this land out of their status that ties them to this land and makes them the inheritors of the rich culture that is in this land. So we're going to start with just quickly going through the Moorish literature in the Holy Quran, Circle 7. And the chapter is called, What Shall We Call Him? So often our various journalists find trouble in selecting the proper name for the Moorish American. Some say Negro, other will brand him race man, still other will call him Afro-American. And then comes colored, dark American, coon, shine, the brethren, and your folks. It is indeed a hard matter to find something suitable for the various occasions where a title needs to be used. Is it that these people have no proper name? Did they have a national name when they were first brought to these shores in the early part of the 17th century? If so, what was it? Did not the land from which they were forced have a name? It now appears a good idea for those whose duty it is to write for the various journals to find out what the national name of the forefathers of these people was. Also look into the history of the founders of civilization and see who they were and where they stood in the building of the present civilization. Probably 2 hours in an up-to-date library would serve to relieve the strain of our men of letters. When the occasion presents itself for a title of these people, the matter of the various names given to these 22 million people with all colors of every race of the globe was an act of European psychology. They gave him a name, then defined it as something inferior to theirs. White they defined as the color of purity. Black, they say, represents everything evil. The Negro, as they were called in this nation, have no nation to which they might look with pride. Their history starts with the close of the Civil War, or more properly with his being forced to serve someone else. Thus he is separated from the illustrious history of his forefathers, who were the founders of the first civilization of the old world. This matter should be looked into with hope of correcting it. Prophet Noble Drew Ali, during that time, knew that there was a problem with us having these labels, because he looked just like us and he wasn't labeled those labels, right? The Prophet also had a lot of documentation done of things that he said by other Moors that were alive during the time of the Prophet. And in the book of Oral Statements and Prophecies of Noble Drew Ali, we could see the significance of the Prophet to us. Oral Statement number 13, Brother J. Blakely Bey said that the Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali said, one day every wheel of industry is going to stop, and when they start up again, it will be in the Asiatics' favor. So right now, like, we're in that time where wheels of industry have stopped. People are losing their jobs, layoffs, bailout packages, etc. Right? All of that is due to the European psychology that they did on these lands to the people who were Moors that they now call Negro, black, colored, right? The idea of industry stopping is based on the fact that the industry was inflated with fiat currency. And with fiat currency having no value, any faith in something that has no value is eventually going to implode on itself. And right now we're living in that time. And yeah, we're talking about commerce, etc., but this still has to do with nationality. Because when we understand the fact that everybody else has a nationality, and we're the only people who don't have one, and we think that it's racism when it's a war against nationality. It's a war against you being able to claim who you really are without someone else's assumption or presumption of you. Right? And the other one that I wanted to read, Brother J. Blakely Bey said that the Holy Prophet said, if the European be just, they would have an Asiatic vice president. And if they had an Asiatic president, they would have a European vice president. Right? Something that's happening today, right now. There's an Asiatic president and a European vice president. Right? Now, it's not, the secret is that they wanted to keep Noble Drew Ali out of the minds of the people based on the information that Noble Drew Ali was bringing. The agents and provocateurs of nationality received their checks or their booty, their compensation from the colonizer. And that false sense of security that the sellouts receive from the colonizer, because the colonizer only pays them in fiat, allows them to do the work of the colonizer because they think that they got paid for a job, right? When they're really doing the job for free because the colonizer gave you nothing. The colonizer gave you a war against your nationality, because if you're a national, you deal with gold and silver. But there's no gold and silver in circulation because they took it out and replaced it with the fiat currency in order to get you under their jurisdiction, wherever you are on the planet. Because if we go everywhere on the planet, we're going to see that they have paper money. And paper money doesn't have any value. So this isn't something that we're just coming out and saying that, well, yeah, nationality. This is something that's been going on for thousands of years. And it's a fiction that they've created that people put blind faith in that gives it power. Right? So the truth is that you have a nationality and that you're not a Negro, you're not a black person, you're not a colored person, you're not an African American, African Canadian, you're not a Trinidadian, Jamaican, Bayesian, Grenadian, Mexican, Puerto Rican. All these names are about your birthrights. And this is an RV Bay publication in association with Moore's Order of the Round Table. Truth about your birthrights. Of nationality. Nationality is that quality, character, fact, and reality of a person or a people belonging to a nation or state. Nationality determines a person's political status as an individual and as people, especially with reference to allegiance. And so nationality determines allegiance, while domicile determines civil status. Nationality arises at birth, superior sovereign citizen, or by naturalization, inferior legalized alien citizen. Nationalization is the acquisition or superior claim of a government over persons and or properties for the purpose of securing what is rightfully the property or possession of the citizens alone, especially if a foreign power has usurped rights or imposed upon the people. Then the legitimate government has the supreme right to nationalize and make claim over privately owned business from abusive foreign interests who have abused their corporate operations with the jurisdiction of another lawfully specified government or nation. Of birthrights. Birthrights are any of those rights which are acquired at birth, and more succinctly involve heritage. Heritage is in reference to that which is inherited, such as that which one receives or will receive from one's parents, predecessors, or ancestors, etc. These rights may pertain to culture, money, property, traits, character, land, etc. Birthrights thus are usually looked at from the perspective of primogeniture. In order to promote goodwill and harmony in North American society, Prophet Noble Drew Ali established the Old Canaanite Temple in the land territory known as Newark, New Jersey, United States Republic, North America. A core interest and function of this organized Aboriginal Peoples Association was and is to restore the unlawfully stolen nationality and birthrights of the Aboriginal indigenous Moors of North America. So the war against nationality basically starts with the fact that there's individuals who parade around in lodges, in organizational structures that are wearing the national headwear of the Moors as their group's headwear. So we're going to quote Brother Pleasant Bay. The brother's powerful elder has a book out right now, Exhuming of a Nation. Contact Brother Pleasant Bay at sevensealspublications.com. Make no misunderstanding about Western Freemasonry. It is the most worshipful god in Europe in which African people know nothing. Yes, there have been generations of Negro, Moorish, and even Muslim who have taken oaths to worship this Goliath god of their oppressor, but none has seen beyond its shadows. If all the sun-kissed men of Africa could see underneath the covers of this poison Kemetan education and reveal its evil worldwide intentions, they would run for their very lives. The god has and will sacrifice portions of its own kingdom to achieve order out of chaos. The foundation of this order is based upon a murder. Yet it is the Europeans' Illuminati which has controlled every president since Woodrow Wilson, gave life to Western Freemasonry, which in turn gave birth to the Western demigods of Shriners and the Ku Klux Klan. The Western Freemason uses colleges, churches, civic organizations, and armed forces to incubate its prosperity. Moors have been working for years to understand the coded powers of Western Freemasonry, not realizing this God is not for them, but about them. We must first formulate our thoughts around the notion of why melanin beings, or so-called Negro, black people, colored people, etc., don't know about the Moorish Divine and National Movement and Prophet Noble Drew Ali. It is because of the war waged on our nationality by people of color and people of color of law. Instead of wanting to know truth, most people belong to a society, base their foundation on the faulty information provided to them by the media and other sources of information of that society, who are the controllers or the on and off switch of the emotions of the puppeteer masses. Remember, information has a root word, inform, and that's all they're doing, the media. They're informing you. Now, we have to note that society is used in Canada to define the community because all bylaws, statutes, acts, ordinances, etc. are written by the Law Society of Canada. And every member of the Law Society has a barrister's card and is subject to all statutes by laws, ordinances, and acts, not the citizens with free national names or the people with nationalities. Keep in mind, barrage, baron, barricade, barrier, and barring to understand the role of attorneys, prosecutors, and judges, etc., who all have a barrister's card. This is why Children Aid Society can steal people's children through affidavits in the court. CAS is the Children's Aid Society. That society is outside of the society we think is Canada. So they can do whatever is needed to fulfill their mandate. And their mandate is basically to extract from families the source of wealth. And that's the children. And they have a reputation of doing this in these lands, especially to Moors, now labeled Negro, Black, and Colored. Most of the sheeple's conclusions are based on distorted perceptions, not factual, truthful information that is functional to the viewer's understanding and understanding of what's being reported on. To understand the Moorish divine and national movement, the Old Canaanite Temple, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, and Moorish Science Temple of America, you, the listener, must first get out from standing under them and stand over them to see them better, while at the same time understand them from a soul and spirit perspective to get a clear picture of what this divine and national movement is really about. Remember George Orwell, 1984, and the Thought Police. Very important to remember, those in power don't want Moors to resurrect from the shadow grave and thinking at all. So the idea is to keep us not thinking, because the less we think, the less we act out our science nature of ourselves, right? Meaning that we are the torchbearers of civilization. And until we start acting like who our foremothers and forefathers were, we would never ever be respected. And the reason we're not respected is because we're labeled these misnomers that not only stifle us physically based on our relations with people, but it stifles us spiritually, because the ancestors know that we're not Negroes, Black, Colored, and we're reneging on our power. We're abandoning our own power to pick up some other power that's based on blind faith, right? So the idea is that Canada, the corporation that many people out there think is a landmass in North America, they have practiced color of law, they have practiced everything in their power to stop Moors from waking up in these lands, right? One of the things that they did is they stopped Brother Malik Zulu Shabazz El from coming here, when some brothers and sisters were trying to bring him here to just speak, you know, at the university, right? This is not something that they're doing because they think he's a terrorist because he has a Muslim name. They're doing this to directly stop the people in these lands, North America specifically, and the corporate region known as Canada, from knowing about their nationality. Because if you research Canadian history, one of the biggest things in Canadian history is the relationship between the European nations and so-called Indians, who but didn't have the authority to do these treaties. So a lot of this land that Canada has was taken fraudulently through contracts that were void at the time of signing them, because the people who signed those contracts didn't have any authority. The Europeans didn't have any authority because they're not from here. And the so-called Indians didn't have any authority because Indians are Moors and Manchurians, or people from the Orient. That's why the majority of people have Chinese eyes, but then they have big noses like us. But then they have straight hair like European. So there's a lot of mixing going on in order to keep this fiction alive. That's not something that they just wanted to do, right? But it's a systematic brainwashing of the people. Canada comes from Kayanata, which is an autochthonous word derived from the Egyptian name Kent. The Iroquois Confederation name Canadigua means first descendants of Canaan. Now, Prophet Kudjo Ali teaches us that that's who we are. We're descendants of Canaan, right? So we have to realize within ourselves what is really being told to us, and what should we take up as the truth, right? Moors always have arguments with people about the fact that, well, why are you calling yourself a Canaanite? We're calling ourselves Canaanites because that's who we are. This land that we live on, called North America, Central America, South America, is part of the Moorish Empire, which is not subordinate to the kingdom over in Morocco. If you go on the SEC website, company 0000230098 is Canada, and it has the maple leaf as its logo. And if you go to the website www.sec.gov/cg1-bin/browse and everything else in here, you'll find that information out too. Canada and its yellow journalism played on the true autochthonous people's mind to activate their emotions with words of deception in an attempt to disconnect the masses from the truth about the severe hidden fraudulent sphere of activity that implicates all heads of this corporate government called Canada and its subordinates into unlawful, tort-filled color of law coercion called bureaucratic slavery. Slavery, whether or mental or physical, isn't over. It's been bureaucratized. So slavery has been bureaucratized to the point where Moors say that they're indigenous people, but Indians say that they're indigenous people. And then Moors say that the Indian is a fiction. And if the fiction could take claim to something that I have to take claim to when I'm an original, then that thing that we're both claiming is not the original. So when we do our research, we found out about some Moors that used to talk about being autochthonous, right? Now, the science of being autochthonous is that gold is AU, and AU has energy behind it. So in words like autograph, which is different than a signature, authentic, authority, autochthonous, all have that gold energy behind it, that AU energy. Now the science for us is that AU is the 79th element on the periodic table, right? Which equals 16, which equals 7, which lets us know that there is the spirit at work when all this physical stuff is going on. Even though gold has value, it's still a physical thing, and its value comes from the fact that it's an element, right? It's not just something created by man, right? The shadow news reporters have continuously called this movement religious. yellow journalism is journalism that is used in order to tell fictional stories to the masses. I can't remember the person's name who initiated or who started or founded yellow journalism, but I know that Oprah Winfrey has a very strong relation to that individual. So if you research Oprah Winfrey's history, you would find out about the origin of yellow journalism. Sue Gambadi, a reporter from CP24, asked me on numerous occasions what the MST of A is, and reporters and journalists were told we are not religious zealots or cult members. Our religion is synonymous with spirituality, and we are universal beings manifest in flesh. We recognize all divine prophets and are not some sect of Islam. When she reported on the Moors, she misrepresented us as a sect, and we called her on it immediately after her report. Her reasoning for calling us a sect was based on, according to her protocol, being allowed one word to describe us, and it seems only sect was on the preferred list of words the journalists and reporters could choose from. On the phone call with her, she stated, "I can't call you universal beings or a religious corporation. It must be specific, one word." We said, "Then call us spiritual, call us indigenous, call us a nation of Moors, call us universal, but we are not a sect." By this point, the news reports were out to the public for 4 hours, and all those reports and journalists with mics and cameras deliberately referred to us as a sect or religion, which we never stated we were. From a metaphysical perspective, we have to understand that it's television, and every reporter is a puppet. Now, one of the interesting things that happened is one of the so-called black reporters that work at this same station that Sue Gambadi works for was telling us that he was a member in the Nation of Islam back in the day. And that night on the news, 6 o'clock news, they had a special on Kudjo El Books. Alright? They spoke about Elijah Muhammad and him being a member of the Moorish Science Temple. They spoke about Fraud Muhammad being a member of the Moorish Science Temple. This is on the news, 6 o'clock news in Canada. Right? It's not like they don't know the truth about our nationality and our birthrights. Our problem is that we don't know the truth and we don't want to accept that truth because of all the fiction that's been backed up against our culture. So for example, we have this war against nationality going on in New York right now, and you know, there's a energy right now that is making us infight amongst each other. So a black nationalist wants to hear me say black power, right? But as a Moor, I would tell you that as Sutek. Because black power, from a law perspective, is not in your favor, right? Because everything black is negative. And if you're pushing some black power, it should be Sutek. Just like instead of pushing peace, we push Islam.
Even Hotep.
Even Hotep. Right? But if we allow ourselves to continue to get punched below the belt by people based on our ignorance, that's not their fault, that's our fault for us being ignorant, right? Now, even though there were a lot of slander basically on the Moorish movement, so they had Melissa Long of National Post said that we're a religious sect. CTV Toronto said the MSTOV is a small sect. Noor Javid called us an obscure Moorish American sect and a congregation of Moorish Americans. Teresa Boyle of the Toronto Star claimed that we are a religious sect. Kate Hammer of the Globe and Mail said that we're a religious sect. Internet news sites said that we're unified by religious beliefs. CBC News labeled us a religious sect, type of obscure religious sect, when we're not sectarians as Moors. You know what I mean? We are not mere believers. A key point to studying is to find other opinions on the same subject matter, to reach a conclusion based on facts, not misrepresented opinions. Peter Kosinski, a European journalist, said some very significant points regarding our status as Moorish Americans based on his personal knowledge or in-depth research of Moors, unlike the news-related, hurried, unproved research that puppet journalists and reporters of yellow journalism do to create a good story rather than put out the truth to the public. Principles of truth are universal, so anything contradictory is a lie. Peter Kosinski stated, members are a part of a Moorish nation and not subject to Canadian jurisdiction. About the Moors, he said, all of them believe that blacks in the US and therefore Canada are former blackamoors and followers of Islam, referring to their former treaties, and argue that they have Moroccan nationality, wear turbans or fezzes, and add the names El or Bey. Right? Toronto Sun, Sharon Lem had a report or an article, and the headline of the article was "Sect Believes in Mind Over Illness." The parents who were arrested in a dispute over their malnourished infant are members of a sect that believes illness is all in the mind, which can be used to cure the body. The 9-month-old parents were charged with obstruction of justice after a dispute at 6 Kids, where the 22-year-old mom refused to hand over the infant to doctors and left the hospital with the baby. The Moorish Science Temple of America was founded in 1913 by Timothy Drew in Newark, New Jersey. Many of its practices were derived from Muslim observances, and the group was a forerunner of the Black Muslim movement. Drew's central teaching is that blacks were Moorish, of Muslim origin. He advocated a return to Islam as the only means of redemption from racial oppression. The sect also believes African Americans are sovereign Moroccan nationals. It's not strange because you have to understand black people in America did not have full citizenship rights until 1965, said Professor Edward Curtis of Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis. He's published books on African American Islam among blacks and the Moorish Science Temple. They believe in herbs and healing techniques through natural means. They also believe sickness is the matter of the mind and the body can be used to heal the body, Curtis said. Often, why this person would not be a monster or hate their baby is because they sincerely believe their forms of healing are possible, he said. They don't believe they have to adhere to the laws of Canada because they are citizens of another country, Curtis said. You have to understand that distrust is part of a deep history of a lack of political rights of people of African American descent, but it is also of abuse of black bodies by the medical establishment, he said. So it's very clear that we're not the only ones saying that we're black people and we're Negroes and colors. The whole world has this perception that we are these fictitious beings. Susan Nance, a historian at the University of Guelph, in a Defending the Moors Misconceptions by the Media article by Kate Hammer of the Globe and Mail, said, they call themselves Moorish Americans and believe they were descendants from Moors or North Africans who arrived on the American continent well before Christopher Columbus, at a time in history when terms like Irish American and Italian American had only begun to weave their way into the vernacular and the title African American didn't exist. calling themselves Moorish Americans offered a sense of identity absent in labels like Negro, according to Miss Nance. It was a way that African Americans could pinpoint something to say, I'm a descendant from that, not from slavery. She said, in the same article, Kate Hammer reiterates the fact Noble Drew Ali insisted that black Americans were Muslim in religion, Asiatic in race, and Moorish in nationality, and called on Moors to return to their original religion of Islam and their true national identity. And in this picture, we could see the Falcon, Heru, wearing his fez. You see Elijah Muhammad wearing his fez. We see His Imperial Majesty, Emperor of Ethiopia, wearing the Triple Crown, which is a fez. And we see Brother Deuce Muhammad Ali, who was the founder of Ancient Times and Orient Review newspaper that Brother Messiah Marcus Garvey worked for. Global News reporter Darrell Conyenbelt put out in his report about our Divine and National Movement that Prophet Noble Drew Ali was a circus magician. The Moorish Divine and National Movement through the Old Canaanite Temple, Moorish Holy Temple of Science of the World, and Moorish Science Temple of America was established 8 decades ago by Prophet Noble Drew Ali, whose free national name was Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali, who wasn't a circus magician. This reporter even claimed to be inept in knowing what this movement is about, but portrayed to the public subconsciously, with confidence, that the founder of this movement was basically a clown. Officially, the Professor Drew Ali, the adept, studied from the highest order of consciousness known to the European and Asiatic historians as the Egyptian mysteries. Keep in mind that America is also Africa in autochthonous history in North America. America comes from the prefix AME in Amexem and the suffix RICA in Africa. So you are in Africa already for those seeking to go back to Africa. The forum our prophet created was to wake up the unconscious, ancient Moabite autochthonous Moors of North, South, and Central America, anciently referred to as Northwest, Southwest Africa Amexem, and to correct the spiritual concepts that were adopted from the European Inquisitionists, reconstructors, and colonizers of the Al-Moroccan Empire. The Prophet stated this Moorish Divine and National Movement to introduce functional knowledge of the ancient ancestral Moabite disciplines through the 5 highest principles known to mankind: love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. He came to teach unconscious Moors of their indigenous claim to the landmass North, Central, and South America, and that at that time and still today is under occupation by European foreigners, misnomer white people. He taught to be active in national and world spheres of civic activity. And lacking knowledge of true history, geography, high science, nationality, birthright theft, and astrologics, the divine and national Moors of this land labeled minorities, Negro, black, colored people, ignorantly abandoned their ancient culture through blind faith, hybrid belief systems, and contradicting unnatural, unspiritual concepts from gods of Europe. Moors placed themselves outside of birthrights, now called human rights, and divine natural law. The Prophet was not out to lunch, crazy, or juggling idealistic balls when he brought us the layout of self-governance through the Moorish Divine and National Movement. By opening a venue for us to proclaim our nationality, through changed literature that changed our thought processing, he made us national Moorish Americans of our own government within the corporate government fiction to which we are forced to live by torts, racketeering, fraud, threats, duress, and coercion. At the same time, our Prophet reestablished our divine government by birthrights and connecting the broken wires with higher powers. The government we live under is a national structure, not corporate, and the movement is a divine government within that structure. All national governments are made up of national citizens who all have a nationality. Our descent name makes us Moorish, and our geographical location on the earth plane makes us Al-Moroccan, misnomer American. No. We've been to court and had judges come up to us and stop us in our tracks to read our sashes that say Moorish Americans and demand that we visit Spain. Demand that we go to Spain and see the mosques that the Moors built that were turned into cathedrals and turned into churches. We've spoken to members in duty council with regard to people who claim to have nationalities that got themselves caught up in the system. And those people who actually work for the court, telling us that the courts are de facto and the rights that we seek cannot be found in those courts. These are people who actually work for the court. That once we present ourselves properly, we realize that people realize who we really are once we present ourselves properly. In 1928, Prophet Noble Drew Ali was a delegate to the 6th Pan-American Conference in Havana, Cuba. This was an international conference of American nations attended by dignitaries of North, South, and Central America. As the European nations in these indigenous lands of Moorish America are foreign occupiers hundreds of miles out of their jurisdiction, they do not have claim to this land, as this isn't Europe. Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali regained our inheritance of the land, as he was the only Moorish representative in propria persona indigenous to these lands to receive the mandate for the land and acquiring the proper ownership of it through trust law. The only beneficiary according to the land mandates to this vast land trust are Moors through our divine prophet Noble Drew Ali, which makes us the successors who would inherit this estate once in propria persona sui juris. This receiving of the land mandate is what caused the stock market crash in 1933. The land that USA was using as collateral was taken away through Noble Drew Ali receiving the mandate for the land. With no land, the Europeans had no claim here, so they stole the real money, gold and silver, and began issuing debt notes through House Joint Resolution 192. The importance this issue has in governmental structure is that Prophet Noble Drew Ali said that he has come to pull the covers off secret societies. So when the secret society or the Union State Society, US, lost the land through Prophet Noble Drew Ali receiving the mandate for the land at the Pan American Conference, they had to create collateral in another way. And the way that they decided to create that collateral was to initiate the bonded person structure that they have with the birth certificate and the straw man and all that stuff right now, that the people are chattel property, and based on the people being chattel property, they are collateral. This is why in any employment office you go to now, there is a human resources department. And that used to be a personnel department. Because human resources, humans are a resource. Just like natural elements are a resource, and oil is a resource, and gold is a resource, and diamonds are a resource, and there's all these, air is a resource, and wind is a resource. People are now resources. Right? A misconception that the masses have about Moors is that our fezzes mean secret societies, and that the secret society is a club like the Rotary or Cadets or Boys Club, when the foundation of secret societies is Moorish history, science, and birthright theft. Freemasons are different than Masons. Freemasons wear a fez that has a bound tassel with jewels and lettering on their fez. Moors' fezzes are as is, no jewels, writing, or bound tassels, as this is our national headdress. And we are the sons of our mother, the Zodiac. It's not that much of what Noble Drew Ali did was Freemasonic, but much of what Freemason fraternities did was Moorish spiritual practice and Egyptian culture. Facts of this are intertwined intertwined in the history of Freemasonry, third-degree Master Mason, Harim Abif allegory. It's even evident in some of the names of the fraternities, lodges, that these Europeans in these societies stole certain keys from Moors. That's the secret of their society. And keep in mind that word society that keeps coming up. And the fact that people who belong to a society that's labeled a society always have the upper hand up on the layman's or the inepts. Shriners, a secret fraternal order also called Ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. Most unconscious Moors claim to be descendants of slaves, and the prerequisite for Freemasonry is that the Mason must be a freeborn, hence Freemason. So in actuality, a black man can never be a Freemason, as he is the foundation of Freemasonry and a Moor by nationality and birthright, and not a descendant of a slave. If we would be less emotional and know thyself in practice, we will see that the so-called black people are subjugated prisoners of war. The Shriners in Toronto perform under the Ramses Shrine on Q Street, south of Shepherd Avenue. The first attention grabber to a critical thinking Moorish scientist is that the European Shriners are using a melanin Egyptian pharaoh's name for their shrine or meeting place. That's fraud in your face. But if you don't know yourself, melanin being, as your ancient foremothers and forefathers taught you, you will never notice when your birthrights are being stolen and claimed by your servant under custodianship. For a Shriner to see a Moor in his fez, he, the Shriner, knows that the Moor knows the truth about their fraternal order and the hidden secrets of their society unknown to the public. So technically and factually, Moors are the true founders of the concept of government that the de facto governments use, based on lies taught to the masses called education. And on the subject of Freemasonry, the lies keep Harim Habif, the unconscious Moors, civilly dead. So when we say about grabbing the attention of these people in these lodges, we mean being a proper person. So if a Shriner picks up a paper and he sees this in the paper, he's going to be offended. Because here's a so-called Negro black colored person wearing the headwear that he wears in the lodge that he can't wear outside the lodge. But this person, who has the same headwear as the Shriners and the Freemasons and all these lodge members, has the authority to wear this headdress on the street, because this is a national headdress for Moors. It's not a Turkish headdress. It's not a Freemasonic Illuminati headdress. This is the headwear of Moors that was stolen from Moors at the fall of Granada, Spain by Ferdinand and Isabella, and during the whole Inquisition, and making us forget about our culture and making us forget about who we are. Now, speaking about Moors, just to put something in perspective about the war against nationality and Moors. On Tuesday, September 16th, the female whose child got taken, her and the father of the child, they received bail, right? $2,500 bail. 2 and 5 is 7. All right? And both of them got $2,500 bail. So that's 7-7. All right? And then on the 17th, so on the 16th she got bail, right? And the bail was $2,500. which is 7. And the husband's bill was $2,500, which is 7. The day after the bill, there was a shooting at a school called Bendale Collegiate. And I'm just going to read some of the article, and I'm going to emphasize the fact that there's a war against Moors, okay? Bendale Business and Technical Institute has always had a bad reputation. There are drugs, guns, fights, and gangs. But over the past year, teachers and parents have been working to change that. They brought in hall monitors and cameras. Police officers began building relationships with students. Morale had never been higher, said Jeanette Morin, chair of the parent council. All that changed yesterday. Minutes before lunch, Timon Moore was shot once in the abdomen in the school parking lot. The 16-year-old, 6'17", fled inside and collapsed near the front entrance. As the school went into lockdown, Moore was taken to Sunnybrook Hospital with life-threatening injuries and several hours of surgery, but in stable but critical condition. So understand that these people know what they're doing. In their news, whether it's on TV, whether it's in the newspaper, they're not one bit worried about the misconceptions, because they know that the people are brainwashed. Now, other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is the fact that the Shriners and the YMCA have a very strong connection. The Shriners and the Knights Templar have a very strong connection, because right here in this book, this is the directory of the YMCA, of every YMCA in the world. You look at the logo on this book, you will see that this logo is the symbol called the Chiro. And the Chiro is the sign of the Knights Templar. Now the YMCA changed their name to YMCA because Young Men's Christians Association were actually the Knights Templar Crusaders who were going around the world and converting through force Muslims to Christianity. And when we say Muslims, we mean Muslims. When we say Muslims, we mean Arabs. When we say Arabs, we mean Moors. Okay? So YMCA has a big hand in the whole colonizing the world for the European Inquisitionists. Right? And if their business is so the World Alliance of Young Men's Christian Associations, if YMCA's business is assisting people, but their origin was going around killing people to convert, if they didn't convert to Christianity, then right now they're racketeering. They're using their business for illegal profits, right? The biggest secret of the Shriners is that most of the Canadian government heads, corporate heads, religious heads, judicial officers, and prestige citizens of Canada belong to some Freemasonic lodge, and more than likely the Shriners. De facto administrative court judges in Toronto have told us personally that they so respect and revere the remarkable Moors of Spain, and that the architectural designs of the churches in southern Spain, which are in actuality Moorish temples. We have never been mistaken as Shriners or members of a lodge when we interact with Europeans in our land while in our national headdress and practicing our indigenous customs. Most Europeans are actually in awe at our presence in proper person, as most good, upright Europeans know the truth about our status in proper person and are willing to assist in uplifting fallen humanity. In the history of Shriners on the Ramses Shriners of Toronto website, they state that the fez, one of the most significant of all headdresses, was handed down to them without qualification as to who handed it down. The fez is the headdress of the Moors. The free-falling tassel represents 720 degrees of knowledge. Only initiates have a tack-down tassel. We are the founders of civilization. Moors are adepts, not initiates. So we see Queen Nefertiti with her fez, and we see an Egyptian pharaoh with his fez, with the ankh on it. We see Dr. Malachi Zadok El in his fez, and we see a picture of Moors from Sri Lanka wearing their fezes. And those Moors from Sri Lanka are called Sri Lankan Moors. So even in Sri Lanka there's Moors. The salutation among the self-proclaimed faith nobles is Assalamu Alaikum, which isn't European. The power this fraternal order uses to survive was and is the high science of ancient Moors, who abandoned their political, spiritual, economic, cultural, educational, and military power for the idol gods of Europe. The site states that no other organization better understands liberty, what it costs, and what must be done to maintain it. They say, to its ranks come many of the foremost leaders of business, the professions, and governments. Shriners claim that they do not project themselves upon the national political scene, but boldly express that many prominent, able, and important men whose voices are heard in the councils of men belong to their society of Shriners. So they're basically contradicting themselves on their own website, saying that they have no national political ideals, but everybody who belongs to the Shriners is in the international and national arena of spheres of activity, right? On the slide here, we have Abu from Aladdin with a fez. And then they used to say that the black man came from a monkey and all this stuff, right? You have Nazis wearing the fez, and on the fez they have the wingdis. So they not only stole the Egyptian culture, but they stole the Moorish culture. But then what do Moors teach? Moors teach that we are the inheritors of the Egyptian culture after it fell, after Ptolemy came into Egypt, or Kemet, you know, and at that time it was already in severe decline, you know, so they inherited a declining nation, right? Also Lord Kitchener's on there with a fez on. The only true de jure nationals in these lands misnomer North, South, Central America are Moors. As Moorish American, we know the secret to these societies, fraternities, and clubs, as it was us, Moors, who gave them their organizational structure of the shrine, and our goddess Moabitis, who gave Albions the organizational structure of government through the Ankh and matriarchal principles. The inductees into the Shriners are greeted by self-proclaimed high priests by the existence of Allah and the creed of Muhammad. Shriners swear, promise, and vow on the Bible and the Quran in the name of Muhammad not to reveal the secret part or portion whatsoever, and to ask that Allah, the God of Arab, Muslim, and Muhammad, the God of our fathers, support me. And in the picture you can see Prophet Noble Drew Ali in his stance of greeting. You can see Prophet Noble Drew Ali in the Arab chamber meeting. And then you can see the Masons in their secret stances which are exactly identical to what the Prophet brought for us Moors to save ourselves in these lands. The truth is, the world knows about the Moors. When the Moorish kingdom fell in Granada to Ferdinand and Isabella in 1492, they sent Christopher Columbus to claim the Moroccan Empire in the west under Britain, so the sun will not fall on the British Empire, since they realized they would never defeat the Moors in the physical realm, but can defeat the Moors if the Moors were erased from the Moors' mind. On coming to these lands, Christopher Columbus found Moors here with mosques, paved streets, government, but chose to pillage our land, rape our women, and kill our offspring to erase the Moors from his story and our mind once and for all. There are Shriner temples called Alhambra. Keep in mind, Alhambra is the name of a Moorish fortress in 13th, 14th century Al-Andalus, which is Spain. The sword called the scimitar was the weapon of choice for the Moors, who were militarily active. The military Moors were known as the Diwan, and the Prophet Noble Drew Ali brought that to us as the Mufti force. And this just goes into, again, the connection to the Shriners and the YMCA, right? Shriners' oath of death, and truly these nobles and faithful men are no different than the TV preachers using honor and sincerity to keep the Moors dormant, while fattening their pockets and wallets under a charitable cause called Shriners Hospital and Shriners Circus. As of 2006, Forbes magazine reports that the Shriners are a $9.4 billion empire. Sounds a little more than a fraternity or organization to Moors and true citizens, since published reports state that 98% of the money Shriners raised at their circuses wasn't going to their hospitals. Only 2% was. And that was in the Orlando Sentinel newspaper. So again, we have to reiterate that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali brought us what we needed in order to save ourselves. And until we decide to save ourselves, we won't be saved. It's all about us saving ourselves. You know what I'm saying? So on that note, we want to end with a greeting to Brother A.A. Rashid for going through his trials and tribulations to get here, having to deal with the de facto corporate nation state called Canada, and realize the severity of our situation out here. Severity of our situation as a whole, because he couldn't even come here. And again, it's a deliberate tort against us learning about our nationality, right? So be in tune, keep your ear to the street for the low density sublinear assault on nationality by people of color by Brother A.A. Rashid. We want to say peace to everybody that's assisted cultural educators of Toronto in bringing the work to the people, and just based on what they try to do to stop us from doing our work is going to give us incentive to even do our work harder than we were doing it before. So again, we want to say peace to all the gods and goddesses of the earth and people of the universe. Islam, peace and love. Hotep.
Faith was founded by this man, Noble Drew Ali, in 1913. Its main belief is that they are African Americans descended from North African Muslims, known as the Moors.